The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
With the news at this time, I am Tiana Jordan. A very good morning to you. The news comes to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories. To begin the news, here's a look at the leads. The Alliance for Change wants the government to cushion the impact of the increase in the price of flour. The Caribbean Court of Justice orders that a murder charge against Guyana-born American Marcus Bisram stand discharged. 2 quarantine men have been killed in a road accident. In regional news, the Barbados government is trying to ease rising cost of living but is taxing some big businesses. Bahamian police say the gunning down of 5 men is linked to drug-related gang warfare. For the international news, we'll bring to you the latest news bulletin from the BBC World Service. The details of these and other stories will be coming up in just a moment.
Don't let the fear of contracting the coronavirus disease deter you from seeking the medical care you need. At Eureka Labs, we ensure the safety of our clients and staff with our rigid sanitization routine. This involves the use of ultraviolet lights to effectively rid the air and all surfaces of viruses and bacteria that may be present throughout the lab daily. The light works to rapidly inactivate microorganisms through a physical process that is invisible to human eye. So the next time you need a checkup, don't hesitate to give us a call on 225-7574 to schedule your appointment.
And now the news in detail. The Alliance for Change, AFC, is calling on the government to subsidize the price of wheat flour. The call has been issued days after the National Milling Company announced that the price of flour will be increased by 15%. The AFC says the Treasury has sufficient money for the extra earnings due to the increase in world oil prices. In the national budget, the Guyana government has pegged its calculations at $74 per barrel of oil. However, due to the war between Russia and Ukraine, the price is now more than $100 per barrel. Vice President Bart Jagdeo has already announced that electricity and water bills will be subsidized by the government. The Caribbean Court of Justice, CCJ, on Tuesday effectively ruled that murder-accused Marcus Bisram should no longer face the charge. Bisram, who is also an American citizen, had been extradited to his native Guyana in 2019 to face a charge that he allegedly murdered Berbice Carpenter Vyas Narindat, a guest at a party he hosted back in late 2016 after the now-dead man had refused his sexual advances. A preliminary inquiry had found that the evidence had not been sufficient for Bisram to be tried by a judge and jury. However, the Director of Public Prosecutions, DPP, had written to the magistrate requesting that Bisram be recommitted to undergo another inquiry. After a lengthy appeal and cross-appeal, the CCJ on Tuesday ruled that Bisram must not be charged again with the offense of murder unless there is fresh evidence.
The court also found that it would be unjust in all of the circumstances for Bisram to be made to answer any charge of murder in this case on the same evidence that was presented to the magistrate. However, because Bisram, at least in terms of the law, was never placed in jeopardy, nothing prevents the DPP from having him rearrested and charged again if fresh evidence was obtained linking him to the alleged murder.
CCJ President Justice Adrian Saunders also says that Guyana's DPP can no longer unilaterally commit someone who has been discharged at a preliminary inquiry. Justice Saunders says until Guyana's National Assembly amends the law, the High Court must decide if someone must be arrested and placed before the court again.
Until the National Assembly addresses this matter, Section 72 should be modified to provide that a DPP who is for good reason dissatisfied with the decision of a magistrate to discharge an accused person may place before a judge of the Supreme Court the depositions and other materials that were before the magistrate on an ex parte application for the discharged accused to be arrested and committed if the judge is of the view that the material justified such a course of action.
The CCJ also ordered that Bisram's passport be returned.
We are prepared, and we do make a further order that Mr. Bisram's passport be returned to him forthwith, unless there are any other charges on the basis of which that passport is being kept. But certainly in relation to the charge of murder, which this case is concerned about, if that passport is being kept on the basis of that charge only, then it must be returned to him.
Solicitor General Nigel Hawke and defense lawyers for Bisram have been given more time to address the issue of costs that the state will have to pay. 2 persons were killed early yesterday morning in a road accident on the No. 1 Village Public Road Quarantine. Those who succumbed to injuries were car driver 20-year-old Lachman Sukan of Ankerville, Port Morant Quarantine, and occupant 26-year-old Yajistir Puran of Rose Hall Quarantine. Police say that at about 3:15 on Tuesday morning, Sukan lost control of the car, causing it to spin several times and eventually slamming into a lorry. Sukan and Puran were both taken out of the motor car by public-spirited citizens and firefighters in an unconscious condition. The driver of the lorry has been arrested and is in custody at the Albion Police Station, assisting with the investigation. A breathalyzer test shows that he was not under the influence of alcohol. The Guyana-Suriname ferry will not be working for 2 days, beginning today. The company says the MV Kanawaima has to undergo emergency repairs on Wednesday and Thursday. The operators of the ferry service are apologizing for the inconvenience. Several months ago, the MV Kanawaima had been taken out of dry dock after extensive repairs and put back into operation. The European Union funded the purchase of the ferry and the establishment of the service back in the 1990s as part of a regional integration program. And now in regional news, Barbados's Prime Minister, Mia Mottley, has announced a cap on containerized imports in an effort to bring down the cost of living. Ms. Mottley, who is also Finance Minister, made the announcement in her 2022 budget speech on Monday.
The government of Barbados will partially shield consumers from the increased freight costs by capping the cost of freight used for the purpose of calculating customs duties at the pre-COVID-19 levels of $7,350 per 20-foot container and $8,000 for 40-foot containers, and we shall hold these costs for 12 months, Mr. Speaker.
After announcing a reduction in the prices of gasoline and diesel, the Barbadian Prime Minister appeared to have clawed back in some of the revenue that have been lost to measures aimed at reducing the cost of living, and also a significant loss of tourism earnings due to the more than 2-year-long COVID-19 pandemic.
We shall introduce a one-off pandemic contribution levy on corporate profits in certain sectors. Where a company with a net income above $5 million in 2020 and 2021 is carrying on domestic business in the telecommunications sector, in the retail sale of petroleum products by dealers, in the commercial banking sector, so deposit taking and finance houses are there, but we exclude credit unions, and in general and life insurance business, then these companies shall be subject to a pandemic contribution levy of 15% of their net income per the company's financial statements for the fiscal years ending March 2021 and 2022.
Ms. Motley says this levy is in addition to corporate taxes.
Mr. Speaker, this levy for each fiscal year is payable in addition to the company's corporation tax obligation, and it is not deductible for tax purposes. This levy will only be in place for the period up until March 2023 and represents, as I said, a one-off contribution to the over $1 billion costs that it has cost us as a nation to fight COVID.
Barbados's Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Mia Motley. Brazil's economy ministry is evaluating a temporary increase of the government's Auxilia Brazil welfare program to help people deal with economic impacts stemming from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The social program, which pays monthly installments of around $78 to approximately 18 million families, would be temporarily adjusted if the conflict persists and rising oil prices keep fanning inflation. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro faces an uphill re-election battle in this year's presidential election, with voters concerned by rising prices and a weak economy. The plan is currently viewed as a backup, the sources said, and has not yet been formally designed, and with no defined value for any eventual increase. Reuters news agency reports that one source says the authorization of this additional benefit would depend on Brazil declaring a public emergency to make the expenses viable. Trinidad and Tobago's Director of Public Prosecutions is being asked to investigate the Prime Minister for misbehavior in public office. Both Gary Griffith and opposition United National Congress UNC Senator David Nakid made the request after the Prime Minister's admission that he met with former Police Service Commission Chairman Bliss C. Prasad the day before the Commissioner of Police merit list was rescinded. But the Prime Minister remains defiant. CNC3's Renuka Singh has the details.
Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley is shrugging off any suggestion that there would be negative fallout from his admission that he was the high-ranking government official who met with the former Police Service Commission chairman back in August. That meeting led to the merit list for Commissioner of Police being rescinded. The Prime Minister's admission on Monday ends months of questions and speculation, but in response to questions on the issue today, the Prime Minister said that he did nothing wrong. He asked since when is providing pertinent information to a service commission considered interference. The Prime Minister said that he did not understand the mystery surrounding the meeting, as he was the only person from the cabinet who, to his knowledge, meets at President's house. The Prime Minister said that he would never tell the POLSC what to do, but they should have all the pertinent information in order to carry out its functions. The Prime Minister said that that was his understanding of an independent commission and that his interpretation had the support of the Privy Council. But not everyone is seeing it that way. Former Police Commissioner Gary Griffith and United National Congress Senator David Nakid have already written to the Director of Public Prosecutions on this matter. Former Commissioner Griffith highlighted 9 issues to the DPP, chief among them whether the Police Service Commission had the authority to rescind the merit list given to the President. In the letter, Griffith says, quote, "We are now seeing that the Prime Minister has openly admitted to interfering with an independent process from an independent body, whether it be influencing, intimidating, directing, or coercing. It means that he interfered, which can lead to someone being charged. This must be grounds for an investigation." Griffith also says that the previous PSC chairman refused to reinsert him, even when told to do so by the majority of the PSC members. He says that this too can amount to misbehavior in public office. Meanwhile, Senator Nakid says that in light of the admission by the PM that he caused the merit list to be withdrawn, he should now be investigated for misbehavior in public office. Renuka Singh, CNC3 News.
And in the Bahamas, several men have been shot dead. As we hear in this report, the killings may be drug gang related.
The killings of 32-year-old Ridge Bryant and 4 other men
during a bloody weekend were gang-related, according to Acting Commissioner of Police Clayton Fernandez.
We believe and suspect that it is a gang-related, and it could be a retaliation. We are on to some good information. We are aware of the different fractions, and as we speak, we have officers out and up and about and trying to identify the players in these gangs.
Bryant and another man were gunned down on Sunday evening on Thompson Lane, just a day after another man was gunned down on the same street. Police confirmed that the man killed on Saturday was not the intended target, with family members lamenting that the killers returned on Sunday.
Based on our investigation thus far, he was not the intended target. We are aware who the target were, and that's why I said earlier in my presentation that family members and friends of these individuals who involved in the life of crime, to stay away from them. They should not communicate with them, not harbor them, because they are putting their lives in danger.
Acting Commissioner of Police Clayton Fernandez updated members of the press about the weekend murders over Zoom. Fernandez says the killings were retaliations and vowed that police would crack down on drug houses and communities.
We have upped our presence in those areas, and we have a team that is going at these individuals. We continue to build evidence on these individuals, and we're trying to break up these gangs. They are not in charge of this country. The police are.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Jared Higgs.
A U.S. judge on Tuesday rejected a bid by a retired Venezuelan general to dismiss drug trafficking charges against him on the basis of foreign sovereign immunity, saying the doctrine does not apply to a rogue state. Cleaver Alcala in 2020 was charged with 4 counts of drugs and weapons crimes. U.S. prosecutors say he participated in a narco-terrorism conspiracy in which senior Venezuelan government officials conspired with the FARC Colombian rebel group to ship cocaine to the United States. Alcala's attorney, Cesar de Castro, said in Manhattan Federal Court that because Alcala was a uniformed military officer at the time of the alleged conspiracy, any action he took would have been in his official capacity and thus could not be prosecuted in the United States. U.S. District Judge Alvin Hellerstein disagreed, saying that sovereign immunity does not affect a rogue state or rogue officials. He says the U.S. justice system is dealing with criminal conduct at the highest levels of government. Prosecutors said that Alcala in 2008 held a meeting with Diosdado Cabello, now a Venezuelan lawmaker from President Nicolas Maduro's Socialist Party, and agreed to coordinate drug trafficking with the FARC. Cabello and Maduro were also charged but remain in Venezuela. Alcala pleaded not guilty after surrendering to U.S. agents in Colombia. The 2020 indictment came as the Trump administration aimed to force Maduro, who Washington accuses of election rigging and rights violations, from office. Maduro and Cabello have denied accusations of drug trafficking and argue Washington is seeking to overthrow their government to control the OPEC nation's oil. Alcala retired from the military in 2013. He has since become a critic of Maduro and backed opposition leader Juan Guaido, recognized by Washington as Venezuela's rightful leader. And now for the international news, here's the latest bulletin coming from the BBC World Service.
BBC News. Hello, this is Jerry Smith. Attacks by Russian forces in Ukraine have continued across the country 3 weeks into the war, despite both sides speaking of possible compromise. In the capital, Kyiv, the emergency services say Russia has shelled a 12-story residential building. Ukrainian officials also say Russian forces have for the first time targeted civilian infrastructure in the southeastern city of Zaporizhia. Earlier, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said peace talks were beginning to look more realistic. From Moscow, here's Jenny Hill.
We have heard these hints from the Ukrainian leader that he might be prepared to make some sort of commitment never to join NATO. Now, that is something that Moscow has been seeking. Whether that's enough for Vladimir Putin, I think, is really questionable, because we know that, in essence, he wants Ukraine to hand over territory. And we know that Ukraine isn't willing to do that. So it's difficult, really, to see how these talks will bring an end to hostilities.
Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister says Russian troops have opened fire from the grounds of a hospital they've occupied in Mariupol. Irina Vereshchuk said it was now unclear whether a humanitarian corridor could be opened to evacuate more civilians from the besieged city. Our correspondent, James Waterhouse, has more details.
There are, for the first time, some small positives in the sense that 20,000 people made it out of the city yesterday. But there are still more than 300,000 trapped, and it's the only place where Russian forces are continuing their advance. The West has given another assessment saying Russian troops are stalling in almost every other area as they continue to have issues with supplies and reinforcements, but it's Mariupol, as ever, bearing the brunt.
Jens Stoltenberg has opened a meeting of NATO defence ministers with the declaration that the alliance is united in its support for Ukraine. NATO Secretary-General was speaking at the first such gathering since the Russian invasion began. Ukraine's defence minister is taking part via video link. Mr. Stoltenberg said the alliance would keep helping the government in Kyiv.
Allies have significantly stepped up our support for the brave Ukrainian people, government and the armed forces, with military equipment, humanitarian and financial assistance, and giving shelter to millions of refugees. Today, it is even more important that we all support Ukraine.
President Biden is expected to confirm a further $800 million worth of military aid for Ukraine, bringing the total this week to $1 billion. US media say the package includes air defence and anti-tank systems. It's likely to be announced later today, Wednesday. You're listening to World News from the BBC. The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has arrived in the United Arab Emirates as part of a tour of oil-producing states in the Gulf. He's described Saudi Arabia and the UAE as key international partners in efforts to reduce Western countries' dependence on Russian energy. Mr. Johnson has defended the trip after critics raised concerns about the Gulf states' human rights records.
I've raised all those issues many times over the past since I was Foreign Secretary and beyond, and I'll raise them all again today. But we have long-standing relationships with this part of the world, and we need to recognise the very important relationship that we have.
In other news, a ballistic missile launched by North Korea from an airfield near Pyongyang has exploded shortly after takeoff. A monitoring website based in South Korea said photos of rocket trails and red smoke suggest the debris might have crashed into suburbs of the North Korean capital. Pyongyang has carried out 9 successful weapons tests this year. Details have emerged of an attack in southern Somalia on Monday, which killed more than 10 Kenyan troops who were part of an African Union peacekeeping mission. Their vehicle struck a roadside bomb in the Gedo region near the border between Kenya and Somalia. The Islamist group Al-Shabaab has recently stepped up attacks in the region. 6 Kenyans and 1 Chinese national were killed last week in an Al-Shabaab raid. The president of Kazakhstan has said the country must change its constitution in order to carry out wide-ranging political reforms. In an address to Parliament, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev said Kazakhstan should switch from what he called a super-presidential system of government to a presidential republic with a stronger parliament. And those are the latest stories from BBC News.
The news was brought to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories.
A COVID-19 PCR test is now mandatory for many routine activities, including travel and return to work purposes. At Eureka, our trained and experienced staff will ensure confidentiality while your test is conducted in a professional and timely manner, with results in just 48 hours. So the next time you require an efficient and hassle-free PCR COVID-19 test, call 624-8378, 608-8378, or 623-72 1233 to schedule your appointment. You can also ask about our house call testing service.
And to end the news, here is a look at the leads once again. The Alliance for Change wants the government to cushion the impact of the increase in the price of flour. The Caribbean Court of Justice orders that a murder charge against Guyana-born American Marcus Bisram stand discharged. 2 quarantined men have been killed in a road accident. In regional news, the Barbados government is trying to ease rising cost of living, but is taxing some big businesses. Bahamian police say the gunning down of 5 men is linked to drug-related gang warfare. And that's the end of the news.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio Newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.